Whoa!
Before I started this channel, I'd never seen a Studio Ghibli film. So I set myself a challenge. Going in totally blind, without reading any research, reviews, or even basic plot information, I'd work my way through every one of their mainline features. To further mix things up, I decided to watch them all in a completely randomized order. Now, all of this seems to have really annoyed some elitist weirdos out there, so I'll explain why I do it like this. I just wanted to experience each one of these works with clear eyes, no expectations, and with no bias based on years upon years of analytical scrutiny. So if any of you want to lash out at me because I don't like a film that you like, or we have a difference of opinion, maybe try not to define yourself exclusively by the media you consume. If you haven't seen the first 2 episodes of this series, they're linked in the description below, so get through those first, and then join us back here for episode 3 of Discovering Ghibli. Between high school studies, running a boarding house, and trying to make sense of her father's death, Yumi finds a sense of comfort and belonging in her school's dilapidated clubhouse. Here she develops complex feelings for Shun, a whip-smart student whose past intersects with her own in the most unexpected of ways. One of my favourite aspects of From Up on Poppy Hill is just how well it articulates the importance of community. Be it the student body, a familial unit, or a group of political activists, the 1960s setting really captures the energy and excitement of a once-in-a-generation cultural shift. Led by post-war youth movements, this clubhouse is a beacon of personal expression and perspicacious growth, where these teenagers carve out what little free time they have to explore the past, improve upon it, adopt the good, and replace the bad. It all ties in beautifully with the film's underlying debate between preservation, restoration, and destruction. These characters are caught between trying to keep things exactly the same, whilst acknowledging the importance of progress, and the reality that sometimes we cannot move forward without eliminating the past. Whether it's their attempts to prevent the clubhouse being torn down, or Yumi's insistence on using antiquated signal flags in the vain hope of communicating with her long-lost father, the marriage of old ideas with a fresh perspective can be found in just about everything here. Beyond that, a lot of Ghibli's more common hallmarks find themselves getting recycled. It's all handled well enough, even if I think the studio has hit these marks much better elsewhere. That being said, there are a few knockout moments that completely bowled me over. The score's miraculous blend of Parisian flair and Randy Newman-esque ivory tinkling puts Pixar to shame, and then there's the debate sequence, which goes from a stirring rally into a screaming anarchist riot, before culminating in an impromptu rousing chorus that's wonderfully realised and comedically flawless. So far so good. That is, until this otherwise simple story goes out of its way to obliterate all the goodwill it's earned with a bed-shittingly awful plot twist. Skip to here if you want to avoid From Up on Poppy Hill's unexpectedly disgusting turn. Yeah, so the burgeoning romance between our 2 leads, well, that goes out the window once Yumi and Shun happen upon the fact that they're actually brother and sister. The rest of the film devolves into a series of longing, incestuous glances as the once rationally minded Yumi continues to have the horn for her sibling. Eventually, the film backs away from this extremely uncomfortable plot with an overly convoluted retcon involving mistaken identities, adoptions, and then the readoption of somebody who's already adopted, but all this horrifying subplot does is kill the pacing, smear every tender moment with a slimy veneer of gross miscalculation, and relegate the whole save the clubhouse arc to a shoulder-shrugging afterthought. Ultimately, this is a very solid piece of work that suffers a similar fate to When Marnie Was There. Whereas that film was a near masterpiece, mutilated by its final act cowardice of convictions, From Up on Poppy Hill feels like a missed opportunity that trades simplicity and subtlety for the kind of soap opera trash I'd always assumed Ghibli was savvy enough to avoid. Kiki, a young witch in training, and her feline companion Gigi head off to find their place in the wider world. Setting up shop in the vibrant city of Kuriko, Kiki puts her talents to good use by establishing a courier service, an endeavour that leads to companionship, many a curious encounter, and some anxious moments of self-realisation. After a lifetime of Disney building a merchandising empire off the back of evil witches, it felt incredibly novel to experience an animated feature where witchcraft isn't an ominous trait to be wielded by untrustworthy women. It's an extraordinary gift that's only used to enrich the lives of others. Kiki's delivery service, much like the titular go-between herself, is an excitable, wide-eyed delight. There's no antagonist, no veil of darkness behind the joy of discovery, just a cast of kind-hearted souls eager to help one another in a community of locally run and ethically minded businesses. And I cannot begin to describe how much the world needs that kind of optimism right now.
How lovely!
The joy of flight and the liberation of life above the surface, children given the same respectful courtesy as adults. These are all Ghibli tropes at this point, but they're as effective here as they've ever been, helped in no small part by one of the most perfectly pitched English dubs I've heard thus far in this series. Gigi jumps straight to the top of my list of greatest talking cats, with Phil Hartman's wry delivery coating every exchange in a syrupy, sardonic charm.
Hello, kitty. Huh. Pardon me, Miss Snooty Cat.
Now, all of this isn't to say this is a story devoid of serious contemplation. As pleasant as this all is, it's about a young woman without parental supervision, facing responsibilities and financial pressures far beyond what a 13-year-old should have to contend with.
Any money left, Kiki?
Not much. Looks like all we can afford to eat now is pancakes.
Then there's Kiki's discovery and subsequent loss of her magical powers, mirroring the transitional jolts from childhood to puberty to adulthood, complete with the shaken confidence, teenage existentialism, and bouts of depression that strip away the naivety of youth. What's truly miraculous about this feature is its willingness to face these themes and fraught moments without so much as a shred of cynicism. The contemplative beats throughout, especially in the third act, are the emotional ballast for the head-rush hopefulness and wacky foibles found elsewhere. From the Mickey Mousing sound of Kiki on a flight of stairs, a shaggy old dog called Jeff, or the frequent and marvellous use of the word dirigible, it felt like every few seconds a little detail would present itself with the sole intention of making me smile. With an entrepreneurial spirit, an infectiously positive outlook, and this phenomenal feline, I cannot muster so much as a bad word about the spellbinding Kiki's delivery service. A wayward prince and a powerful wizard team up to try and restore the balance to the sprawling land of Earthsea. With a mysterious young girl and a retired priestess, they must fight back against an unhinged warlock whose search for life everlasting threatens to destroy the world. You see that brief plot synopsis? That's as close to any discernible sense I could make of the hacked up, stitched together and edited to oblivion jabberwocky that is Tales from Earthsea. I was vaguely aware going in that this is a condensed adaptation of 4 books worth of material, But even with those red flags in mind, I never expected Studio Ghibli to release something that feels at best unfinished and at worst broken. Here's just one example. The inciting incident comes when our protagonist, Prince Aaron, murders his father, the king. Now you may be asking yourself, why did he do that? Why is this barely mentioned ever again? Why are we supposed to think this patricidal, regicidal child is in any way the good guy? Tales from Earthsea, on screen at least, never comes close to answering any of those questions. So from the get-go, we're asked to align with someone who murders an innocent man, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. This isn't a matter of plot holes. It's that half the plot isn't even here. None of which is helped by the complete absence of even superficially memorable locations or set pieces. There's a field, a market, a farmhouse, and a musty old castle. And that's about it. What spare environments we do explore don't even feel linked. As it stands, the people of the world seem in no way concerned with or connected to those in power, and vice versa. Even within the castle, and I'm sorry to harp on about this, but nobody cares or makes any real comment about the fact their king has been stabbed to effing death. What we get in lieu of intrigue and adventure are almost 2 hours of generic musings about balance, light versus dark, and good versus evil, while whatever slight motivations these cardboard characters are afforded are presented as a series of dry, droning speeches. It's not just a matter of these roles being uninteresting. They're also unimaginatively designed and paired with voice actors who sound like they're falling asleep. If I was to grasp at straws for something good to say, well, the score is suitably sweeping and grandiose, even if it isn't enough to quicken the pulse of this boring slog. A pair of comically cheap, nosy old hags, or a spot of comic relief where it's much needed. Then there's the opening dragon fight, where tooth and claw scrape together as god rays puncture an ashen sky. Yet, even this incredible opening salvo comes with the bitter aftertaste of everything that follows. To the extent that it just feels like a bait and switch, where excitement and ambition are slowly crushed by the weight of impenetrable plotting, undisciplined adaptation, and lackadaisical direction. Tales from Earthsea may have just enough artistry to warrant a curious watch for the completionists, but beyond that, it's a bewildering bathtub fart of an experience and a head-scratching failure. Presented as a collection of animated shorts, My Neighbors the Yamadas humorously sifts through the foibles and strife of an eccentric Japanese family. The first thing you'll notice, especially when watching this within the context of Ghibli's more grandiose cinematic works, is how minimalistic just about every aspect of My Neighbors the Yamadas is. Its animation style standing as the outright antithesis to the studio's more typically sweeping vistas, meticulous designs, and eye-watering scale. What we have here is an experimental ode to the dog-eared manga of old, rendered in such a way as to mimic their boisterously expressive characters and shaky strokes of comic book watercolour. Long-form storytelling is also skewed in favour of something closer to a compilation of surreal anecdotes, blending absurdity and mundaneity into a hearty broth of domestic squabbles and funny asides, as the Yamadas flit from one offbeat scenario to the next. A child lost in a shopping mall, a first crush, an argument of attrition over what's for dinner. They're wry, frequently silly, and chock full of the kind of cutaway gags and non sequiturs that Family Guy would eventually run into the ground.
Hey Lois, me make drive time to a super fun clam with Noble Quagmire and Wheel Monster Joe. Go Force!
The scattershot assemblage of these vignettes at first felt like a refreshing change of pace. an experimental scrapbook of ideas, content to exist as its own weird romp. With a ragged appeal and universally relatable pathos that calls to mind The Simpsons' early appearances on The Tracy Ullman Show. That being said, this doesn't really work as a feature-length presentation. At over 100 minutes, the lack of narrative structure or character growth, coupled with the stop-start fatigue of binging these sketches, had me running short on patience after about an hour. Then there's the saturation score, which, while decent when appreciated on its own merits, is so omnipresent and inescapable that I grew tired of its insistent prodding long before the credits rolled. My Neighbors the Yamadas is clearly a passion project, drawn with an enormous helping of love and affection for the medium. I just would have preferred its brand of well-meaning peculiarity as a selection of bite-sized snacks, rather than an overstuffed meal. And with that comes the end of Discovering Ghibli Episode 3. We've still got plenty left to cover, so be sure to stick around for more of these beautifully realised wonders. A big testicled tanuki for our Patreon producers Jennifer C, Claire MD, Becky O, and Nicholas Lair-Revere, and a sassy cat talking smack for all these incredible folks over at Patreon who so kindly support the channel. So what do you make of each one of these films? And where would they rank in your overall assessment of the Studio Ghibli canon? Let us know down in the comments, alongside your personal top 5 Studio Ghibli features. The best way you can help the channel is to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment down there for engagement, as it helps YouTube push these videos out to more folks. If you're in a position to do so, consider checking out our Patreon at the link in the description below, where you can get access to the In Frame Out Film Club, our private Discord, and your name in the end credits. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, this is In Frame Out.